Hello and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be asking the question, is 2020 the perfect storm for Europe's small and medium-sized enterprises? My name is Dave Keating. I'm a journalist based in Brussels, and I'm coming at you live from the Euractiv studios in the heart of the EU quarter. Now, I don't have to tell any of you out there, 2020 has been tough, and it's been particularly tough for small businesses, especially those in the hospitality sector. In early surveys, over 50% of SMEs indicated that they could be out of business within the next few months as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and since then, many have indeed gone bankrupt. On top of the pandemic, we have the Brexit decoupling coming in just 45 days, which is going to mean more uncertainty for businesses whether or not the UK and the EU can agree a deal by the end of the year. In this climate of uncertainty, it tends to be the biggest businesses with the deepest pockets that emerge still standing on the other side of a crisis like this. Big companies have more resilience and flexibility to deal with the costs that these shocks entail. These costs include upgrading workplaces for health safety, changes in work processes such as increased working from home, and adopting labor flexibility in lean times. SMEs also tend to have a lower level of digitalization, making it harder to access and adapt technologies to this new reality. Now, if Europe's SMEs disappear, it could spell big trouble for the economy. SMEs make up over 90% of all businesses in the EU. They employ about 100 million people and account for more than half of Europe's GDP. Right now, as Europe experiences its second lockdowns, the SMEs in the food and drink sector are being hit especially hard. These businesses are keenly watching to see how the EU's €750 billion recovery fund, still awaiting adoption, can help them. But that's a possible third crisis thrown into the mix, as we saw this week Hungary and Poland veto that COVID recovery relief over an unrelated dispute on rule of law. There's also other EU policies that SMEs are looking to for help, notably the EU's new farm-to-fork strategy. Can that give them a boost in these troubled times? The European Commission has made liquidity measures available to them also to support SMEs, and that's outside of the budget framework. Those are available now. It also responded to the COVID crisis with the new SME strategy for a sustainable and digital Europe. But how can the EU best support SMEs as they struggle to emerge intact from this crisis? We've assembled an expert panel to discuss what the future holds, and I will introduce them now. With us today we have Birgit Weidel. She's head of unit for SME strategy at the European Commission in the DG GROW department. Then we have center-right Slovakian MEP Ivan Štefanec, who is president of SME Europe also. Then we have Marie Audrin, Director General of HOTREC, the umbrella organization of hotels, restaurants, pubs, and cafes. And finally, we have Geert Vermeesch. He's CEO of Colac, which is an SME making ice cream ingredients and products for dairy, bakery, and food service markets. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping notes. You guys at home are going to be able to ask your questions to the panelists using the Q&A feature on Vimeo. That's down at the bottom of your screen. Now, you want to use those only for questions. I'm going to be reading out those questions at the end of the panel. Don't make statements. I won't read out statements, so it's a waste of your time to put them in. If you'd like to make statements, you can put them in the chat feature. That's a separate function. You can use that to make points or rebuttals to what people are saying, whatever you like. So remember, the chat for statements, Q&A for questions. I'm not watching the chat, so I won't see anything if you put it in the chat. Also in the Q&A, it's great if you can identify yourselves and the name of your organization, but if you'd like to answer questions anonymously, that's okay too. I will also be reading those out. And you can join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag EADebates. This event will be available on recording afterwards on Euractiv's YouTube channel, so if you want to watch it again, go back to Euractiv's YouTube channel and you can find it there. Now, let's start the conversation. Birgit, I want to start with a question for you, because obviously the Commission has really been working on these issues during these couple intense months. What is the Commission doing to help SMEs through this difficult period?
Hello, good morning. And the Commission has actually been mobilizing all its forces to address the crisis. Right from the outbreak, we were putting in place a set of measures, the immediate needs. And as you know, the most pressing needs for SMEs was actually liquidity. So we put into place the Corona Response Investment Initiative of 37 billion euro. And in July, the Commission, as you mentioned before, was putting forward the most ambitious stimulus package in its history with Next Generation EU, that is 750 billion euro to the EU budget. And that is really there to support an overall recovery plan. Now, what did we do, for example, concretely in the SME Directorate? We were directing an extra billion euro to the European Investment EU Fund, and this has allowed to give loans, bridging loans to companies. We were able to raise 8 billion of additional euros with that, and we could support 100,000 SMEs in addition to the normal business, I would say. I also want to mention the SURE initiative that is providing 100 billion of euro to member states as national short-time work schemes, preventing the companies from laying off their employees. And we will, of course, continue this injection of liquidity with different instruments, Escala, InvestEU. But I think we are all also very clear that in the end, liquidity is a temporary measure, and there are limits to what we can achieve with this. In the end, it will depend on the capacity of companies to adjust to this crisis and to make the necessary adaptations to their business models. And this is what leads me to the SME strategy that you also mentioned. It was adopted in March 2020, 2 days before actually the lockdown came in whole Europe. So it was not actually an emergency instrument, but there are a lot of measures in there that if we adjust them and adopt them, they can be really useful, because the key objective of this strategy support companies into the digital and greener economy. Now even more important, because I think everybody is now back to normal after this crisis. Companies will need to adapt to the new reality. We have seen how important it is to be digital, and we also want to come to a greener reality after this. So the strategy has a lot of measures to support companies in making these changes. It's really a change management tool. There's a lot of tools to enhance the resilience of SMEs, because with this strategy, we also are fighting a couple of obstacles that companies are facing, like the regulatory burden, difficulties to access markets, and so on. So it's really this combination of liquidity, but also measures helping companies to make the change.
Ivan, let's turn to you next. You are both representing your constituents in Slovakia, and you're representing SMEs across Europe. So what kind of difficulties are SMEs facing right now? Ivan, are you there? I see your screen is black. We may have lost Ivan. Okay, let's turn to Marie next while we're waiting for Ivan to reconnect. So Marie, you're representing businesses in the HoReCa sector. So what difficulties right now is the hospitality sector encountering specifically?
Yes, good morning, Dave, and good morning, Joel. Thank you for having me. This debate is very timely and happening at a critical moment for the hospitality sector, which is facing the hardest crisis it has ever to face. It's really unprecedented since March for many of our members. To give a few numbers about HoReCa and the hospitality industry in Europe, prior to COVID, it's about 2 million companies, and the numbers are confirm what you said in the introduction, Dave. 90% are SMEs and even micro companies. So many of these companies employ less than 10 people. What is an important feature as well, of course, is that we have a lot of workers, 12.5 million of jobs in the sector before the crisis. Um, Almost a quarter of these jobs are for young people, so people under 25. So that's really important. Also, our contribution in terms of people getting the first job and the diversity and the inclusivity of the sector. So what we are facing right now is unprecedented. Of course, we are now facing these second measures or lockdowns and restrictions. And this is really hard because the major difference is that at the time of the first lockdown, where we were facing either administrative closure or just simply lack of travelers and guests, compared to that phase right now, of course, SMEs in particular are in a far less resilient place. So that really creates, again, the acute issue of liquidity, and that was mentioned by the representative of the Commission. But right now, we are also seeing really the risk of insolvency and bankruptcy. And that's, of course, an issue directly for SMEs. There was a survey recently done by our French association where 2/3 of the respondents were saying that they are concerned that their business can close in the coming months. So that's really the acute immediate challenge. And if you combine that with the fact that there are no travelers and hospitality is a major pillar of the tourism ecosystem, which is a very important in Europe, but there are no international travel. We still are facing a lot of restrictions. So this part also of the business is very much impacted. Now, we see also for these SMEs, certainly that the recovery will be really long, will be slow. We don't expect any return to normal, if I can say normal, before 2023. So we will need that continued support from the Commission, from the member states, indeed, to help those companies to regain their capacity to trade. And certainly, you were also saying, I think this traveler and guest confidence will be important. These guys have made a lot of investment to open safe place, safety for their workers, safety for the guests. So that's really important. But what I wanted to stress is that what is really difficult right now for us is this lack of clarity and the uncertainty. So obviously, we really hope, and we are calling for, this consultation, having a clear exit strategy, but this yo-yo, if I can say, in and out of restrictions and the uncertainty, and of course, I fully appreciate that it's a bigger issue concerning the health, but certainly this uncertainty is very difficult for SMEs. So that's really what I wanted to say introduction.
Yeah, it's that yo-yo of uncertainty that I'm hearing so much from business owners here in Brussels, people who manage bars and restaurants. It's that they just don't know what's coming next, and they understand that we're in an unprecedented situation, and the government kind of doesn't know what's coming next. But for them, it's so hard to plan, right? It's so hard to know how much food you should order, what your preparation should be for the next month when you don't even know if you'll be open. It's a difficult situation. I think Ivan is back with us now. So Ivan, I was asking before, you're representing both Slovakian constituents and SMEs across Europe. So what, in your experience, what kind of difficulties are SMEs facing right now?
Yes, good morning, everybody. SMEs are really in a very difficult situation, as all of us we know. Most of them, they face challenges of decline, particularly in hospitality sector. There is in the whole EU like 80% decline of revenues. And as we've heard before already, liquidity is the issue number one. So 90% of SMEs, they face the issue of liquidity. They need immediate help because they do not have big reserves as big ones. So I would say point number one is liquidity. From short-term point of view, they need immediate help. From long-term point of view, I think in the European Union, capital market union is the answer also. And we have to build also all the opportunities in order to improve access to capital. Secondly, the issue is digital infrastructure. Particularly in some countries, we have to improve digital infrastructure because as we moved during pandemic to the online world, there is the issue that quality of infrastructure is not adequate, and we have to improve that. Also, the issue of digital skills is on the table, and the question of the whole digital single market. Third point I see, and as also SMEs answered at our questionnaire, which was organized by SME Europe, the third point is single market. We have to complete single market, and we have to remove all the barriers which we have still, particularly on the borders. Many states dealt with this pandemic separately. Many of them, they just built the barriers, which was not definitely helpful for all the businesses, particularly for SMEs. And talking about the hospitality sector, as I mentioned, there is a strong decline, but we have to understand that there is a strong multiplier effect, particularly for suppliers like soft drinks, beer industry, etc. So hospitality sector is very, very important for Europe. It creates 10% of employment, and therefore I think we have to take special attention to these issues. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ivan. So Geert, you are really on the ground here with this, and I think actually your business is a good illustration of just how much the whole value chain can be affected here, because obviously if you're making ingredients for ice cream, if an ice cream shop has to close because of a lockdown, that obviously affects also that shop's suppliers. So how have you been finding this period, and how has your business specifically been affected?
Hi, good morning. I'm Geert, responsible for a company Colac, which is a typical Belgian SME. We are employing 50 people with about 12 to 13 million euros of turnover. We are, of course, facing extremely difficult periods, and we have been affected, I would say, in three ways. The number one has been in terms of turnover. There has been a direct economical consequence on the turnover of the company. Especially here in Belgium, the month of April was a difficult month with a decline of 25% in turnover compared to normal business. If I look at year-to-date figures, we are, I would say, 5 to 6% in decline, which still is acceptable. And it illustrates the importance within the company of having a quite diversified product portfolio and a quite diversified customer group and customer segment. So that has been able to defend to some extent the decline in turnover. The second consequence in this difficult period is related to employment. We have seen quite an increase in absence of people on the working floor due to illness, quarantine, but also due to family circumstances, meaning they have to look for children, they have to look for their parents. So that has been a difficult period in terms of employment. And even more important, I would say, on that issue is what we see today is there is a big challenge in motivation and involvement of people. What we see with this second lockdown is that people start to be kind of demotivated, lose their enthusiasm in combination with a lot of family problems. And that's a big challenge for us as well as SME to keep people involved into our business and to keep them motivated. The third consequence of this very COVID crisis is in terms of investments, short-term investments and long-term investments. As to short-term investments, we have been obliged to look at what I would call what is nice to have and what do we really need to have. So we have kind of made a separation between what are the nice to have investments, what are the need to have investments. The nice to have investments have been postponed for the moment. In terms of long-term investments, we will make the same exercise, what is really needed for the company and what is nice to have for the company. So in that perspective, we face turnover issues, we face employment issues, and we face investment issues.
Yeah, this new distinction about what is a nice to have is something I keep hearing from businesses and business associations here in Brussels, that things that they might have considered before are now deemed a nice to have and that they can't go for. Marie, let me ask you a question, because you're really talking to all the businesses here. What would you say is the worst case scenario for SMEs if the correct policy tools aren't put in place? And what is the best case scenarios if we really get this policy response correct?
Well, I think for us, as I said, the worst case scenario is that, of course, this situation drags on, and it's true that if it goes continuously, and I take the point that yes, this liquidity is a big issue, but we have coming up the bigger issue of the insolvency. So that really would be devastating, especially if we see no end of the tunnel. Now, the best scenario is that we are able to work and reopen. We know that it will still be difficult, not under the same conditions, and certainly very strict rule. But they are ready, the company, I think, if they get the appropriate support to make that challenge. So, for example, and I like the point Gert made about staff motivation and skills, and we are experiencing that, and that's really extremely difficult for us because the attract workers, attract talent, retain them is an acute issue for our sector. So really that support and commitment would be very important on skills and support workers.
Yvonne, what do you think is the worst case scenario here for SMEs?
Roughly 50% of SMEs, they face the threat of bankruptcy. So the worst scenario is that just they have to close the business. But the best case scenario is that they change themselves. They change the supply chain, and they changed the method how they sell the products. They moved more to online world. And also, I think they need appropriate legislation. As we have heard about the issue of staff motivation, I think we need to have a look also to the flexibility of labor code, because in some countries, I know this is not totally European issue, it's a national competence, but we have to address that because it's very much connected with the new changed situation and with the motivation of staff. We need more flexibility how to employ workers, and particularly in hospitality sectors, this is the valid issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. A reminder to our viewers, you can ask your own questions to the panelists using the Q&A feature on Vimeo. Go ahead and start putting those in now. So Birgit, Yvonne earlier mentioned liquidity problems that SMEs are facing. What can be done to support SMEs in the short term, specifically when it comes to this liquidity problem, both at EU level and at national level?
Well, I mentioned all the different instruments that we have been putting into place, and yes, it's a I mean, it's not just the Commission, but we also rely a lot on the national. One point that I would like to bring in here is something that is a bit underestimated, but is the issue of late payments in Europe. We have a huge problem of being paid in time, not being paid in the agreed payment terms are very long. And 1 out of 4 bankruptcies in normal times is due to that. So here, one, as I said, is due to late payments. So if we can really establish a faster payment also concerning the public sector, because in some areas we see really long payment delays, we could think of liquidity economy by money just turning faster. So this is one of the actions that we will reinforce in the SME strategy to establish a faster payment culture, that people are really paid when companies are put their service.
That's an interesting idea. Geert, how helpful would that switch over to a fast payment culture be for you? And what are some of the other tools that would help with short-term liquidity problems for SMEs like yours?
Okay, first question when it's related to payment terms. I think the most important point is that in the whole chain, we should, I would say, ask people to stick to their current payment terms, not to start to delay payments, because this will give a kind of a snowball effect. And therefore, it's important that we all take the responsibility to try to honor our existing payment terms. Second issue, when it comes to liquidity, I have a kind of other point of view which I would like to mention. It's we should look at what is the origin of being so many SMEs in trouble with liquidity. What is the reason? What is the cause for this? And I think I want to make a point on this, that we should look at the problem is that a lot of SMEs have very little reserves. We have little financial reserves, and therefore I would like to address also to the government as a more long-term issue. If I look at an SME compared to, for instance, a multinational company, it's very well known that multinational companies pay in general very low corporate taxes. I would like to go back to the origin of the liquidity problem and to say, why would we not give an incentive to SMEs if they are profitable and they keep the money in the SME as a kind of a reserve? Why would we not lower those corporate taxes for the money that they keep into the company? And that was a point I would like to make today. It's what is the origin of the liquidity problems?
So Marie, let me put that point to you, because you're representing both SMEs and larger companies within the hospitality sector. So what do you think about that point from Geert, that corporate taxes issue would help SMEs? And then also, what do you think about Birgit's point about increasing that payment rate, speeding up that payment rate?
First, I mean, and certainly, I think it's really important that there is a specific consideration and support to SMEs to see the future when such circumstances happen. I'm not necessarily expert on the corporate tax, but I really see the point of Geert that it will be important also for our sector when we come out of this crisis to understand what happened and how we can prevent a future similar crisis. So that's, I think it's really worth considering it and look at maybe on what are the burden on SMEs and when they can have a specific support. Yes, on the payment, I mean, but that was a significant issue when the crisis broke out. And of course, the suppliers and everyone in the value chain is very important for the hospitality. We were able to find agreements with some of the suppliers, discuss and assess, but certainly maybe compared to some of the public dimension, this is less acute for us, but that would be important as well, that we look at that payment front.
Ivan, what do you think about this idea of increasing the payment rate, speed rather? Would that help with some of the liquidity problems you mentioned? And also on Geert's point about the tax structure being less favorable to SMEs?
In terms of late payments, this is absolutely valid point. There is a late payments directive on the European level, but the point is that this is not properly implemented in all member states. I think we need to have the process in place where we will force also member states to implement late payments directive, which gives the limit for payments not only in private sector, but particularly between public sector and private one. Second point about taxation, small ones and the big ones. I think also this is very, very, very valid point what was mentioned here. Sometimes big players they have advantage, particularly for tax reliefs connected with investments, which is not the case for small players. I think we have to have a look to this because on the paper we have the same taxation, but in fact, as we have a look, more major players, they have a lot of advantages, particularly connected with investment plans, and very often execution, because they deal with taxation issues. They gave a lot of reliefs, according to European legislation, up to 15% tax reliefs for new investment plans. But basically, small players, they don't have this advantage. So at least we have to create the same conditions for everybody. Thank you.
Birgit, let me put this question to you about the different tax structure for small businesses and large businesses. And also maybe if you could address a larger point, because obviously this crisis takes place in a context of SMEs struggling to compete with big companies for a whole host of reasons, not just for reasons of corporate taxation. Do you think that this crisis is going to exacerbate that difference in the playing field for SMEs versus big companies?
Yeah, thank you. On the tax incentives and so on, I think our tax reliefs, this could be an extremely useful tool to governments because that's the huge problem for SMEs. They don't have the big reserves. So, and we have heard now the reserves are going down, and as Geert has mentioned, we have to think very clearly now which investments we are going to do. And here I think it's really a call on the government to use these instruments to make sure that the companies make this necessary investment fit for the future. And tax incentives could be a good instrument here. And yes, the way our tax systems are created, it's much easier, of course, if you have a big international structure place where you make your tax declaration and then you get off with the lowest tax, whereas smaller companies don't have that possibility, and they are the big fences of our tax system, and this is definitely unfair. So indeed here there would be a lot of possibilities to create a bit more fairness, I would say. And then the other point you mentioned, yes, we have some kind of issues in this. How is the relationship between small and big companies? And we know that it's not in all in all situations. I mean, I think we have to come to a model of more solidarity. This is also what we will in value chains, and an understanding that we are all dependent on each other. So we have seen certain behaviors of big players, which were not so nice behaviors, being aggravated during the crisis, and this is something that we have to watch and make sure that it doesn't happen.
Makes sense. Marie, let me ask you, obviously it's very sad when a business closes down. That affects people's lives, it affects the people who run the business, it also affects the customers who really like that business and will miss it. But it does possibly present an opportunity for new innovative companies to come in and fill the void. So obviously we're probably in any event looking at some kind of shakeup here. In all kinds of sectors, including in the hospitality sector and the food and drink sector. If some SMEs close down as a result of this crisis, does it present an opportunity for other new companies to enter the marketplace?
Well, I mean, there's been already a lot of transformation if you look at the sector over the past few years. So yes, I'm still hopeful in a way that this is also the creation and the value creation. And yes, there will be also changes in the sector, the digitalization, the environment. We are in the sector also where a lot of the change and the adaptation is driven by the demand, and that's a really important feature of, we think, the recovery, especially in the hospitality and also the tourism sector, driven by the demand of consumer, their value. For example, if of course look at the sustainability, the environment, how we adapt, also the offer we can make in terms of the place of the solidarity of our establishments in the society. That's really important, and that has already started before the crisis. It will change. So that certainly there would be opportunity to look at how we can respond to consumer demand and adapt and really match and give them the experience that they're looking for. So that's really consumer facing, and guess will really be important for us to adapt.
Geert, what do you think? I mean, in your sector, in the food and drink sector, this will be a disruptive event, and economically speaking, disruptive events always do present opportunities to both new players and existing players. Do you see opportunities for a business like yours in this disruption?
Well, let me say that from a general perspective, a crisis always accelerates the end of some companies and always accelerates the start of new companies. That's, I think, typical for every crisis, is the acceleration of ending of companies and new companies. My point I want to make here is that I feel that if the business model of the company is not really adapted anymore to the new circumstances, I think we should accept to some extent, because there is no company that lasts forever. So yes, business is changing and the business model should be adapted. What is really a pity, or could be really a pity, is that companies go out of business just because of short-term liquidity problems. And that's what we really should avoid. It's companies having a good business model, a well-adapted business model, but just going out of business because of short-term liquidity problems. That's what we really should try to avoid. We should not keep businesses in life that don't have a well-adapted business model, but we should keep businesses alive that have really potential in the long term. And in general way, yes, there will be opportunities for new companies in terms of home delivery, for instance, but that's the point with every crisis, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, some businesses that will go out of business as a result of this maybe that closure is just accelerating something that might have happened anyway if they don't have a good business model, whereas other businesses may have a very good business model that would have succeeded in normal times, but they have to close down because of a liquidity problem. Birgit, let me put that question to you. As the EU is developing these funds, both specifically targeted at SMEs and the more general recovery fund, how do you decide which is a business that truly deserves that money? Because obviously you don't want to prop up businesses that would have failed anyway or will fail eventually under any event. How do you make that distinction?
Well, I would like to say that to government and policymakers, we should be very careful with the money that we have available, because we should really avoid throwing away money. We should look at helping people in an intelligent way, which means what business has a way of life, has a good way of life and needs help. And help can also be in a very easy access to helping measures. I will give an example in Belgium. The very easy way of getting access to economic unemployment without any, I would say, long-term administrative procedure was very helpful to our SME. So I would like to make a distinction between this help that was really very good. On the other hand, I see examples of help that we need to avoid. I would give an example. If I see subventions where the deliberation is made on a first come, first serve basis, that's something I don't like. We should still look at what is the content of the help we give.
Birgit,
so I think that's important.
Birgit, how is the Commission going to make this distinction? Because it's a difficult call to make, right?
Yes. I mean, first of all, I would like to say I fully align with Gerd and what he said. We have to be selective in a way, but on the other hand, it's not us who will be selective. So it will be the companies who will show, and in a way, setting directions, if you want, on this billion package. We have already said that a certain big amount of money will be for green investments, and another amount of and another part will be for the digital. So, of course, we are pushing reforms in a certain way, but it's about really the individuals' companies' capacity to show that their investments make sense, make them future-proof, also bring societal advantages. So it's not the Commission in a way, it's just set the framework conditions, but in the end it's about the company showing it can present a successful business model, and I've agreed that all the support tools should be based on that, just on a first come and first served basis.
Yvonne, what do you think? How do we decide which SMEs are deserving of money and which are not?
I think the best way how to distinguish is that just to create awareness that money is not coming from the heaven, because every fund has to be paid back from on the European level, on the national level, and particularly on the private level as well. So it must be driven by the efficiency, and it must be driven by private sector. Therefore, the answer is that we should not provide money for free of charge, but we should push the money in the way to provide credits. And if there is this awareness, if there is this framework that money will be provided in the way that they must be paid back, so it is the best way how to improve enough.
Marie, what do you think? I mean, do you think SMEs should be able to demonstrate a very viable business model before being eligible for funds? And if so, what is that successful formula for an SME to weather this storm that should be demonstrated in order to receive funds?
make the point about, there is also the importance for the SME that if you put a structure in place, I mean, the access to information and the access to the finance and how they can get that support, I mean, it's very important. And then I think as business, as company, they are best placed and well aware about how they can present their plan, how they can present their investment, their project very well. But one of the issues we are hearing a lot in the membership and in particular for SMEs is their ability to receive the information, understand and even try to access some of the support mechanism, not necessarily the immediate ones that were put in place for at the time of the pandemic, but really the different funds, the access to finance. I mean, this takes a lot of time, and you can imagine in a restaurant or in a place where people are already very busy. I mean, how can you get time to look for those funds and access the finance? So. I mean, some of the speakers mentioned, the fact that it should be easy, that it should be clear, and really trying to help. I don't know if there are also at local level, regional level, some support to explain how they can get that support. And then I think from their knowledge, from their expertise and their project, they can defend themselves and get that support. So it's really how the two are combined, but really with a specific attention to their information and their access to that information and how they can get the money.
Birgit, what would be your response to that?
I think that Maria has been addressing a very valid point, because it is free for a company to understand what's the best way, what are the funds that I should best use. I wanted to point everybody to our European enterprise network. This is a network of 600 partners that we have all across Europe, and specialized advice for businesses who need to make certain investments, who have probably some innovations and so on, how to, on their business models and so on, also how to find business partners in other parts of the EU that could match their interests. So this is a source companies could get advice, because to find your way through the different ways of funding that are available.
Yvonne, let me ask you, you are working with SMEs across Europe in all sectors. How well do you think that the food and drink sector in particular, businesses like Geert's, how well are they faring in this crisis as compared to businesses in other sectors?
I have to say that generally SMEs are more flexible. So despite the fact that many of them, they face the threat of bankruptcy and they are really in difficult situation, at the same time, I have to say they are very, very flexible, and usually they are more flexible as big players, and they adapt relatively well to this situation. They try to find new opportunities. They use different marketing tools. They try to change supply chain and the ways how they deliver products. So generally, due to this situation and taking into consideration that this is really situation which is unprecedented, so I can say that SMEs as the major employers, they face this situation relatively well.
Birgit, you're also looking at all SMEs across all sectors. In the Commission's view, how well are food and drink companies weathering the storm as compared to businesses in other sectors?
Well, I think we have to differentiate what is food and health. I mean, I think hospitality as such is a huge. The service sector is heavily affected. What we understand in the goods sector, it might look a bit different here, because I think we have even seen increase in turnover with this foods trading and so on. So yeah, I think there's really also a point maybe when you said how to select, we have to see which sector is affected in which way, because it's not equal across all the sectors.
Let's switch gears to talk about the other looming crisis, which is Brexit. Marie, one of the big concerns about the Brexit transition, so just at home to be clear, the UK technically left the European Union on January 31st, but nothing really changed other than politically, because the UK has still been in the EU's single market and following all the EU's rules since then. That transition period ends on December 31st, and that's the big changeover. It's going to be a huge effect on the economy no matter what. The question is whether a free trade deal can be agreed before then that would lessen the impacts. So Marie, as your businesses in the hospitality sector are looking at this, one of the big concerns about this transition, frankly, whether there's a deal or not, is the possibility of food shortages in the UK if food can't clear customs quickly with those new customs checks that have to go into effect, again, deal or no deal. For your businesses who are UK businesses supplying food, getting food from continental Europe, or continental European businesses getting food from the UK, how worried are they about this switchover that's going to happen in 40 days?
Well, that's a good question, and the title was the perfect storm. So it's true that if you address to our colleagues in the UK and also in Ireland, that in addition to what we are facing with the COVID, is really a great concern for my colleagues in these two countries. Also in terms of you see, we are also really dependent on the attractiveness of the territory, the willingness of people to come and know that this will be also in terms of the working condition, what will be the framework for the movement of people. So that's really an important issue for them, I have to say, and you won't be surprised, it's a bit less so for the rest of the continent, but certainly for some of the business that are operating across Europe, they watch that really with great attention. And again, that's really living in this uncertainty, which causes great concern for this small business.
Geert, as I recall, Belgium is the second or third most exposed country to the effects of a no-deal Brexit. Is your business exposed to the risks of no-deal Brexits in any way?
Well, my business specifically is very limited exposed because we have very limited exports to UK. But of course, it comes on top of COVID crisis, so even the limited exposure we have is affecting our business. I think from a small SME point of view, for me it seems unbelievable how people in UK and in Europe do not succeed to come to a solution in a quicker step. I think today what is puzzling us as SME most, it's two things. It's first the uncertainty of what is going to be the case within a couple of weeks. So the big uncertainty, what is going to happen? And secondly, I think it stresses the big importance of one single European or one single market. Whereas we as an SME, we are depending a lot on exports. So we should, in a general way, really avoid anything that is against the single market. Of course, we are involved into local agriculture, we are involved into local development, but we should be aware, for instance, if I look at my company, 70% of our business is exports. So yes, we are affected, but we should keep in mind that we need a clear rules on a single market perspective.
Yvonne, how worried are you about the prospect of a no-deal Brexit? We're really getting down to the wire here. Are you worried that the European Parliament will not be able to approve this deal in time for that December 31st deadline? And what do you think will be the effects on SMEs to be dealing with a no-deal Brexit at the same time that they're dealing with a pandemic?
I'm very worried about no-deal Brexit because Brexit as itself, it is the damage for European and particularly for British economy, but it will have a negative consequence. As we know, it is a lose-lose scenario. What we can do, we can only minimize the damage. It will be damage to the economy and to everybody, and of course, it will have some impact to SMEs as well. In order to minimize this damage, of course, it would be the best way to make a free trade deal. If it is not achievable, we have to work together with our British partners on tariffs and non-tariffs barriers in order to minimize them, because there are also additional negative effect in order to create any additional barriers. There will be some effect to food and drink sector as well. There will be some effect to IT sector and particularly also to SMEs. Of course, it's very difficult to quantify because we don't have the final agreement still yet on the table, despite long negotiation. I'm still hopeful, but at the same time, I'm very worried about no freight trade deal.
Birgit, the Commission is making contingency plans for a no-deal Brexit. Does the Commission have any contingency plans specific to SMEs?
Well, we don't have a specific contingency plan for SMEs, but of course, the overall contingency plans look at where are the bottlenecks, the specific bottlenecks that we can foresee, so it's part of a bigger picture, I would say. But I can only echo the concerns, in particular relating to what is referred to as the single market and so on. Massive effects on. And we have seen this already with the crisis, with the disruption of supply chains. But maybe then it's all insights with the crisis that companies had to reorient themselves anyway. That this is maybe then coming together, and we will have to look how we adapt these. But overall, we also still hope that we can get to agreement, because there will also be, of course, a lot of damage on the other side of the channel. So the hope is still there, but yes, of course, we have to prepare for the bad case scenario, which looks now more likely.
Well, finally, let's move on to the third potential crisis in this wonderful year of 2020, which is the possible failure to deliver on the 750 billion euro recovery fund agreed in July. So that recovery fund, when it was provisionally agreed over the summer, it gave a big boost to markets. It gave a big boost to confidence in the business community to know that that fund was there and that it would be backed by the Commission itself, that for the first time we would have a collectively backed EU debt. But now that fund is being called into question because Hungary and Poland are threatening to veto it unless the rule of law mechanism tying EU budget funds to adherence to the rule of law is dropped in the overall seven-year budget. Marie, let me ask you, I mean, I imagine that the hospitality sector was greatly encouraged by the news over the summer that that recovery fund was agreed. What are you hearing from your members over the past couple of days as fears grow that this fund may actually not happen?
Well, I think let's hope that it will happen, because It is so essential. I think what our members have been doing and trusts, I mean, it's so hard right now for many of them, but they've been working hard with the government, try to identify in the national plan where they can get the support, where they can get the help. And this is really, time is of the essence for the sector. So we really hope that this the EU collectively, in the sense of also solidarity and responsibility, will find a way, because this support is really critical for our members, and they need that European reassurance and solidarity. And you're right, it was a message of hope. Because they know that they know how to do their business, they know how they can offer what they have to offer in the hospitality, but that this help is necessary to do it. So look, it's something we are really highly concerned if this were to delay, because as I said, time is of the essence if we really want this one to be efficient and prevent some of the SMEs to disappear.
Yvonne, what's your take? How likely do you think is it that we may not actually get this fund? And let me also ask you, if the rule of law mechanism is dropped from the budget, I know the Netherlands has threatened to veto, and some in the European Parliament have threatened to veto. Do you think the European Parliament would agree to drop rule of law conditionality in order to get this budget, to get the budget and the recovery fund approved?
European Parliament is pushing very much to include rule of law into this deal. Therefore, definitely we do not support any drop of rule of law from this deal. But I do believe in common sense. I do believe in negotiation. I understand the position of Hungary and Poland, but it's the matter of negotiation now between European Parliament, Commission, and the Council. So I still have some hope that there will be good result of this negotiation by the end of year, because also Hungary needs these European resources. I'm pretty sure that they are very much dependent on this recovery and resilience facility. That's the first point. Secondly, I'd like to mention that there is a strong pressure from Parliament as well as from European Commission to include into this recovery and resilience facility a major part for green technologies and also for digital technologies. So those are two major objectives from European level to push forward and to include them also on a national level. Thank you.
Birgit, I know you won't want to get involved in what is a negotiation between the Parliament and the Council, and also you wouldn't want to engage in hypotheticals, but can you just clarify what funding is actually available already or will be available that is not part of this recovery fund that would still be available to businesses?
Well, of course, we still have the normal EU budget, and there we have also a lot of tools that we can use to help our companies. I'm just referring, for example, to our single market program or Creative Europe for the sector. Then we have Horizon that will massively in the green area and in the digital area. So there are still a lot of funds available. But yeah, I mean, a pity would be really because with the recovery, we wanted to, in line with our ecosystem logic and bringing together really the actors, looking at how in supply chains, in value chains, we are linked together, what is really needed, bringing everybody around the table and together using this money for large-scale projects that would really in the European value chains and European ecosystems. And if we wouldn't have that amount of funds available, I mean, such projects, of course, would be highly endangered. It would be a big pity.
Indeed. Let's take some questions from the audience now. We have an interesting question here from Janet Kaiser. She asks, when are the banks and the banking systems going to pay the rap? Could it be seen as payback following the 2008 crash? An interesting question. Ivan, maybe you can tackle this from a political angle. What should be the role of the banks and financial institutions in helping out these businesses? And do they owe something to citizens after they were bailed out in the 2008 financial crisis? Ivan, are you there? We don't hear you. It may have frozen. Okay. Ivan, can you hear me?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Can you repeat it?
Okay, yeah. Let me take the question again. So
yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, great. So the question are, what should be the role of banks and the banking system in helping out businesses right now? Should the bank's role here be seen as payback for citizens bailing out the banks in the 2008 financial crisis?
In terms of role of banking, yes, definitely it should be the same as before, but the current crisis is different in comparison with financial crisis 10 years ago. Now it is pandemic and it affects everybody basically equally, some sectors more as we talk. For example, hospitality sector is affected more. So banks should take care or should take it into consideration also in their plans. But I also would recall to my previous remark about efficiency. So banks, they are private entrepreneurs as well, so they have to take care about efficiency. Now it is more about the legal framework and about the framework how to spread this unprecedented package, which is recovery and resilience package, but banking sector has the separate role in terms of improving efficiency in terms of dealing with this money. So this is just one part, important part, but one important part of this chain.
Geertz, what do you think? Do you think banks owe us all something for having been bailed out in 2008 and they should have a particularly strong role in this recovery?
Well, I personally do not believe they really owe something. What has happened has happened. We should look at the new situation. I think the main part I would like to ask from banks and to expect from banks is that even though there is a COVID crisis, even though we have the Brexit, we still have opportunities. And I really believe that even in these new circumstances, there are opportunities. We have to turn every stone. But I would ask from the banks, if there are opportunities to invest, please look at the investments not through COVID glasses, but through normal glasses, and support us with investments, because it's only through investments that we come to recovery, and we will be able to reverse the curve if they support us in our investments, and that they look at these investments in normal way, how to support the company.
We have one more question here from an anonymous questioner who says, Geert's take is actually relevant. What could be done to assist SMEs to change business models? I think that's a question for Birgit. This questioner goes on to say that they consider requalification of employer and employees to be included in that business model. So Birgit, what can the Commission do to encourage a change in business models to make them more resilient to crises like this?
Yeah, indeed, there is a big issue about capacities, I would say, in SMEs to engage in these new business models. As you said, you need to build up digital capacities. You need also to understand how can I make my business model more sustainable. In the SME strategy, I've seen a couple of measures to help companies there. We will install the sustainability advisors in the European enterprise networks that will companies how to make their businesses more sustainable. We will expand the digital innovation hubs that will also expand their services, also helping, I would say, not so well advanced companies. So digital tools can make their processes more efficient and so on. What is the potential for using digital tools? So there is a lot of support for more traditional companies, and then of course for those who are driving these technologies, I would say, because here we provide a lot of innovation support, also how you can secure your innovation and so on. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I think there's so much to talk about here, right? I mean, we're facing so many concurrent crises in 2020, and we'll see how the next 2 months pan out. It's been really interesting to get all of your takes here. I want to get some final thoughts from each of you about what you think the key takeaways are from this discussion and where we go next. Ivan, let's start with you. What are your final thoughts on this topic?
So also from this discussion, definitely there was confirmation that for SMEs, liquidity is the issue number one. So immediate help for SMEs is very necessary. Long-term perspective, the right framework, how to implement this recovery and resilience facility. I think we shouldn't forget about reduction of administration cost, and one of the best help to SMEs is administration cost. Last but not least, we have to work on the completion of single market and on the establishment of rules which are the same for European Union. So completion of single market, building digital single market, talking about building capital market union in order to improve access to capital for SMEs. We shouldn't forget about long-term plans, which are good plans, how to help to survive this challenging situation. Thank you.
Marie, what are your key takeaways?
Well, look, I would agree certainly for this need for immediate support, but what is really important to us is, of course, we all want to see somehow the end of the tunnel. So let's be optimistic. We had some positive news in the past few weeks, and certainly really clarity on the exit strategy, because living in this uncertainty, I think it's particularly difficult for the SMEs. Certainly, this continued long-term support to help them to bounce back will be important. They are ready to adjust to the digital and a more sustainable era. That's for sure, but they need support. One important aspect, I think, for us is about people, so our workers. So focusing on the skills, apprenticeship scheme, really the support of the UN member states to really reskill, upskill people will be important. But also, look, let's stress the importance socially, not only economically, of these SMEs in the diversity in the European territory. I think their social role is really important, and that should be supported, and really make sure that they are not pointed at as responsible for the main concern, but they recognize as well as important socially.
And Geert, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I believe on the very short-term issues, as mentioned by Ivan, I think on the liquidity problems, I would say let's look at what is the origin and what is the cause of so much liquidity problems. I would definitely go back to my point of corporate taxes. Second short-term point, apart from digitalization and other things, I think we should really care about motivation and involvement of people. It's very not only challenging periods for our companies, but it's also very challenging periods for people. So involvement of people, motivation of people is a very important point we should not forget. And more in the long term, I would like to make a following point. It's let's not stand on the brake altogether for too long time. I mean, retailers, consumers, industry people, because if we stand on the brake for a long time, we will create ourselves a huge snowball effect, I would call it. And therefore, let's be optimistic. Let's be creative. I know people are creative, and continue to believe in the future and to do new investments.
And finally, Birgit, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, indeed, I think I see really the big challenge in the long term, as you have said. But I think we just have to use the creative potential that our small companies have, and that they have shown in previous crises as well. Huh? Sure that they will still be able to make the necessary investment, have to help that long term as well to become more sustainable. Probably this stands still, but to really, as you said, upskill, upgrade the managerial skills in companies, but also, of course, the workforce. And I also took good note of the issue of the insolvencies, because this is also a very important point. We will face insolvencies. It's important structuring framework. The insolvency laws are designed in a way that they make it also easier for companies to make a new start. And that we can give a second chance, so that out of a failure there can be another chance to set up something better.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for some really interesting insights here. I think we've gotten a real flavor of what people are thinking on the ground right now. It is a time of extreme anxiety for all of us, but I think there are some silver linings out there, some hopeful signs on the horizon that maybe the worst of this is over and we're not going to get to that worst case scenario that we talked about. So thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you at home for following along. You can find a recording of this panel on the Euractiv YouTube channel starting pretty soon, I think today. So thanks so much, and I wish you all a great day. We'll see you for the next Euractiv Debates.